So, dear participants, dear attendees, good afternoon from the German capital. I would like to welcome you to our fifth and last panel of this workshop that is entitled Environment and Epidemics. We will start with muhamedvaljevac. Mohammed obtained a BA and a master's degree from Marmara University in history, and he also proceeded to a second master's degree in management at the same university. He is an instructor of Ottoman Turkish language and morphology, and he conducts research on cultural, social, and political history and history of art. His publications address the topic of heresy and monasticism in Bosnia and cultural studies in general. In his paper, he will present the ravages of the plague in Bosnia between 1729 and 1739, the measures taken and their impact on the urban and rural environment of Bosnia. So, Mohammed, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Yorgos. The last year, before I start, when I saw the advertisement about this opportunity, I sent it to Mr. Fatih, and I couldn't even imagine, that he will call me. So before I start my presentation, I want to thanks and give thanks to the Mr. Fatih and Orient Institute of Ayrıca. So now, before I start, I will share my screen. Just a moment. The great Bosnian page. So, did it come?
Yes, that is fine. You can proceed.
Okay, nice. So, when we speak about Bosnia, about Balkan, many facts we can know, it's like they were the part of Ottomans or part of Austria, and that's it. The cultural heritage, the problem about pandemics, especially now when we have COVID, they are not very known and well-known facts. So today, in my lecture, I will try to explain to see it about Bosnian Great Plague. So let us start from the first slide. I participated in the three separate ways. The first one is the period till the 700s, the Great Holy War, the uneasy peace, the result of loss of territories. The second period is from early 700s to the 1729, when there were some wars and of course the outbreak of the plague. And the last one, the period is still the 1739 or 1740s. It's over of the plague. Then what was the impact? How did it manage the Bosnian society, the Christians, the Jews, the Muslims? Are they getting more together or separated? We are going to see all these stuff. So let us start. The first period, early 1700s, as we know, there was a big Austrian war in 1861. The unsuccessful Vienna besieged 1882, 82 and 83. And the massive starvations, taxes, and uneasy peace. And the most bad thing would happen in 1684 and 1685 was that the people and the soldiers from Bosnian Sanjak, they were slaughtered in the forest of Vienna and Bohemia. So let us continue a bit. We can see the borders before the Great Holy War in 1682. The next one is the painting, which shows us the slaughtering in the fight, the Bosnian soldiers and the Austrians in the fields of Bohemia and Vienna. And next one, which was the most important before the pandemic, the Venetians in southeastern Bosnia, and today is the Mostar, the city of Stolat, and so on. They tried, to besiege it, to take it over, and it was hard. So, in the hard times, they poisoned the wells. And in early 1700s, the Venetians, his name was Marco, he portrayed a city of Mostar and Portugal near the Venetian border, and here we can see how the well was, were poisoned by Venetians. So let us continue. In 1729, the first thing, which we can say was the Treaty of Passarowitz in early 1720s. After the treaty, in 1725, the first case which was registered in the records was the plague in the city of Dubrovnik and Zadar. And since the Croatia, just a minute, since the cities of Croatia and Bosnia were close, the plague spread easily. After the Dubrovnik, the first signs of the plague was, to be found in the city of Mostar, Trebinje, and then it goes to the Saray, Bosna, to the capital. So, what's the main point of the Dubrovnik here? As we all know, the Dubrovnik was a vassal state of the Ottoman Empire, and the pilgrims who were going from Bosnia to the Mecca or to the Istanbul were using, a safe passage from Dubrovnik to the Istanbul and to the, Mecca by sea. And when they were coming back in Dubrovnik, there was a massive, huge construction. We will see it in next slides. In that construction was used as quarantine building for all Ottomans, for all Dubrovnik, and for all Venetians. So, after the first outbreak in Bosnia, the problem started happening. The people, were dying, getting killed, or getting eaten. With plague came a starvation. So the Ottoman and Austrian provinces, the Croatia, the Hungary, and the Bosnia, need to collaborate, even if the central Istanbul part was not so happy about it. The most, willing people to collaborate was appointed by the Bosnian governor. His name is Sirke Osman Pasha in early 1730s, and his name was Mullah Mustafa Bey. Başeski, his surname. And he was appointed to go to see every part of Bosnia to see how it could be stopped, helped, served, and whatsoever. And after 3 months of walking and seeing, he wrote a new book. A book was called A New Behaving Codex. And I put a picture, it's original, and in that new behaving codex, we can find approximately 30 rules. It starts like this. Behold, in the beginning, it was Almighty God who created the earth, the heaven, the angels, and he permitted and approved people to live on this earth. And people did a sins, and since our sins, it's a bad thing, he get them a punishment. A punished is a plague. So in order to fix the plague, we have to be more, prayerful to God, preachful, like the first rule. Then he is putting the second, third, and the last rules, like all people shall paint in their houses in white. The hospitals, the first prototype of hospital, we can find it and see it in Bosnia. After the hospitals, the people who are dead, shall be buried with no funeral and so on. Also, they should be put to the fire. Their houses, homes, whoever is getting, dead or infected by plague. The next rule is saying the people who are, get infected by plague shall go and do it, be in the forest, outside of the cities, quarantine zones. And here we have the example with quarantine zones, quarantine fortress, which can be founded in Bosnia, and we will see it. The next one, when I say the next one, the next Bosnian officer was Ali Pasha Hekimov in 1735 to 1740s. Since he was a doctor who came from Istanbul, he knew what the plague does it mean. And since he knew it, he started to make and give education to the doctors he wrote in his diaries, which are partially translated to the Bosnian, about his daily lives in the Bosnia. And in 1737, we had the Battle of Banja Luka near the fortress, in today's city, Banja Luka, where the Bosnians started and succeeded a massive victory against Austrians. In Austria city, in Austria garrison, it's more correctly, they had seen it, like alcohol, but not the alcohol which is used to drink, but for disinfection. That medicine alcohol, the prototype, of course, they are bring to the Ali Pasha Hekimoğlu, which is explained in this new behaving codex, and he ordered, to every household in Bosnia, Muslim, Christian, Jews, and whatsoever, have it together to use it, for cleaning and so on. And in the following years, the place was mainly destroyed. It was finished, and we will see it now. So, during the plague period and plague time, the first thing which we can see it's Ordo Fratrum Minorum. The Order of Franciscans in Bosnia. They were, like the keepers of the Bosnian sustainability and so on. They entertained interreligious dialogues, helping people, no matter are they Christians, Muslims, and whatsoever. Since they had connections to the Pope, to the Rome, they were going, directly getting aid. And I say many people to help with funeral and so on. And with that, we have ordinary people, love and stories. For example, Mullah Mustafa, in his explainings in 1737, he is saying, like, the people were dying, and one younger man see a girl. She was a Christian, and he fell for her. Wanted to marry her and to get her. But the problem was, the family didn't want to give to him. And in this case, the order of Franciscan go to that family and spoke to them and help to get the girl. So the Christians, Jews, Muslims, even in the bad times like plagues, even in the good times for centuries, they had been living together in Bosnia. So we can continue. After 1737, the people and the Bosnian government arranged massive marriages to get people who were, died from the plague. After that, the next thing, which came from the Istanbul was massive taxes policy. And it was getting on the knife in Bosnia. So many people all together, revolt against the tax politicians. The next one, we can say the Franciscans had many visitors from Croatia, from Austria, and these visitors, travelers, in their diaries, of course they were written in Latin mainly, they explained and they couldn't believe how people get together without any problem, how the plague was used to bring them together. So they help in a bad, in a good times. In the continued place, Christians, Muslims, and everyone else, they had, like massive prayings. Stop the plague, to get the water, to get the rain, and so on. And after the 1740s, the plague was mainly over. So let us continue a bit. So, the next one, during the plague period, and mainly in the Balkan, everyone, including Muslim or Christian, had a myth. What is the myth? It's the white cloak healer. This myth, we can go back to the past, to the Middle Ages, and these men, they were called like, Haydar Bey, Haydar Dede. And these, so-called grandpa, they were good with flowers, with medicaments, and they were going from home to home, giving people healings, praying to God in their own way, like we can see on the picture. He's praying, to God by touching a tree, and so on. And everyone must believe that they were, a saint man, that you should not get, in bad way with them. You should help them so the God will go and be with you. What is the main point of the white cloth healer is that these people were actually getting education in Ottoman education, in Ottoman madrasas, high school about medicine, and the Ottoman medicines in early 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, they used to wear a white clothes. So they actually had a good, proper education, medicine for that time. But the people, they're not aware of that. So they, seeing in them like a saint man and so on. What next? So the government, that new codex which I wrote, just like today, in these days, they were forbidding for people to come in the coffee shops to get together because it's spreading plague. Just like they are telling to us today, it's spreading, COVID virus. And we have a shop. It was portrayed in the early 18th centuries, but colorized by Archive Museum Sarajevo 2 years ago. So here we can see the Battle of Banja Luka and how the people and the soldiers, more correctly, giving to the Hekimoğlu Ali Pasha, a victory and medicine, alcohol used for medicine treatment, and plus other things. So, here we can see the city of Leyte. This was the main cathedral of the medieval Bosnian state, and place where the kings used to crown themselves. And in the Ottoman Empire, it was the partially mosque, partially church. And during the plague, the Franciscan monasteries used to help people to build a prototype of hospital. Now it's just a ruin, unfortunately. Here we can see the Bosnian Franciscans. They are giving a funeral ceremony, even if it was forbidden in 1737 for the died Christians and Muslims all together. When we see the healer from the plague, we can what was like in medieval Europe, the people with the hat and so on. That picture and that kind of healers were stayed in Ottoman Western provinces like Bosnia, Serbia, partially Croatia, and so on. Here, the plague healing, like I said, with that white cloak healers, they were going and seeing a people in the open fields. And here we can see in 1734 that the man was trying to heal someone, and he actually succeeded. That's how Mullah Mustafa Basheskia explained us throughout his writings. Here, on the next picture, we can see the plague at its peak in Sarajevo in 1736. Like I said before, the government ordered whoever was sick that his household should be put to a fire. And here, it's the best picture view of that. So in the next picture, we can see the quarantine place on the right side for the pilgrims who were coming from Europe or from holy places like Jerusalem, like Mecca, to the Balkan in Dubrovnik. And the quarantine period in that time was 4 months. So you had to be at least for 4 months with everyone else in the same buildings and so on. And people, just like now, they were trying to escape to, when the night falls, they are trying to escape to go away to this home. And the Ottoman government strictly was ordering that whoever escaped from the quarantine should be bring back to Dubrovnik for another 4 months. So here we can see the codex and rules of new behaving, which I said, but that was written and ordered in 1734. Oh, it was written in Latin alphabet, not in old Ottoman but the Latin alphabet which is used, it was actually the transcription of old Ottoman texts. I mean, of the old Ottoman texts, since the Bosnians in Bosnia were using Latin, the Kirill, and also the Bosnian version of Arabic letters. It is so mixed that even now we get, so surprised and shocked when we see a new document. The next places, here we can see in Sarajevo, Haji Mustafa Mosque. It was the central funeral and revolt place from which point everything was happening in early 17th during the plague and whatsoever. What else we can say about this mosque? In 1870s, the Ottoman principal, Haji Abdi Pasha, tried to kill all Jews and Christians. And the old Muslims in Sarajevo gathered together on this place, and they forced to abdicate Haji Abdi Pasha in 1870s. So here we have a visitor from Vienna who had come in 1732. His name was Franjo, we call it Franjo, and he was, he belonged to the monastery of Franciscans, and his diary was so important that he explained to us that the people were dying on daily basis, not like just daily basis, like in a minute in the city of Ayrıca, that in one day approximately 5,000 to 6,000 people died and no one was able to bury them. And his diary is still originated in Latin language. Like I said in my speech before, we can see the quarantine fortresses and castles in Bosnia, which is used for the plague or some other, treatments. And this place was mainly based on the west here in Bosnia, because no one was living there except gypsies, so they could not get connected to the fortress. And here we can see that they are trying to understand and to write a plague in 1734 and 1735. So the post-plague period, if we come, the first thing is we had the first prototype of hospitals. The popularity of Mullah Mustafa Bey, because after he was the tax collector, he was appointed to be a preacher in America. Like a preacher, I guess. And after the next one, we have massive marriages. After the massive marriages, the population was slaughtered, by the plague, obviously. The Ottoman government was inhabiting the black agriculturists, gypsies, and more, Orthodox Christians from the Romania and from the Greece. The next point is that the people in Bosnia, they did understand that central power in Istanbul, it cannot help them anymore. So the local authorities, like the captains, like the soldier, and so on, massively grow in power, and that will result in the Bosnian rebellion against Ottoman Empire in the 19th centuries. Then after that, we have the spread of trade. The Bosnian, water supplements, then the gold supplements, and so on. It gets known from the France, from the French, from the Austrians, from the Russians, of course, from the English, and they all try to open their consulates, try to export as many period and things to the Europe. The last point we can also say is the plague results in the spread of Baroque in Bosnia, Baroque buildings. Then they started to talk about Slavic unity between, Croatians, Bosnians, Slovenians, Serbians. Health measures. When I say health measures, the people get used, to paint their home in the white at least 2 times in a year, then to clean up, to have clean water, to have not poisoned wells, and so many other things. The next things which we can explain, it's music. After the plague, the music used to develop, to grow so massively. Many people were dying, and they were trying, nice music, songs, we can say. Because of that, the Jewish specific music instrument with Bosnians, they get together and they form a new type of music, only especially for that area region. It cannot be found in Croatia or in Istanbul, only for the Bosnian period. And we call it something like Setalinka. It's like a love songs. The final steps we can see and explain. The play forced the people to start to write a lot, and with that we have a press. The first, like Mejmua, newspapers, explanations, even from both Muslims, they are coming all around. And the final step after the plague period is a new culture, a totally new culture, which we can say like this: the Bosnian Muslims are not like typically Muslims from Turkey or from the Iraq or Middle East, and they are not typically not the Christians. So the culture was very something like in the middle. It belongs not to anyone, but it belongs to everyone. We can say it like that. And in these days, people still do they remember when on 14th of December they are giving a fire, like in to God thanks for the getting over of the plague. Here we can see the prototype of French hospitals. These all pictures are not polarized in the last 2-3 years from the museums in Bosnia. The people, the man, after the plague, sitting in the Sarajevo, early 1740s. Of course, it was portrayed by Ali Pasha Hekimoğlu, and we can just imagine, yes, it wasn't polarized correctly, perfectly. Here we can see our writer. It's Mullah Mustafa Bashkes. Yeah, himself sitting, and explaining to the people about his traveling, his walking, and so on. This is his chronicle, which is published in Bosnian. Here we have original text on the left side with the Bosnian translations. And here we can't say it is, typical Ottoman alphabet, because the Bosnians were using Bosnians in their own Bosnian alphabetic letters. Here, this is also a nice place. Mullah Mustafa Bashesya is explaining his tales, stories to the ordinary folk. What he did, what he saw, how he wrote, and so on. And as we can see, no matter, no difference, even if they were a woman or a boy or a man, they can all have places together. Like I said, massive marriages in Balkan culture, and maybe you will know Mr. Yildiz, nothing cannot happen if you do not drink a coffee. Allah, a story of fights whatsoever, everything is happening with a coffee. The last one, for the conclusion, we can say the story in our past about plagues, about pandemic, whatsoever, they are important for us, so we can know and see how to make it better our future. And after that, we can say that these kind of topics, especially from Balkan, in Greece or Bosnia or Croatia or Slovenia or Serbia, they are not, seen enough. So we could and we should translate them more and make studies in English, Turkish, and similar topics. And the next point, which I obviously write it, is to translate it to be aware to all major languages. With translating to languages, the people, the academic staff, and so on, will be able to understand better epic narratives from Balkan region. How was written in the songs, stories, that all other things love, epic story, everything will be so much better understandable. And the most maybe important things for us, with these kind of conference explanations and so on, we can help the Balkan to protect their written cultural heritage. The Balkan is still not aware of the potential of this heritage, so many things are still destroyed, even in this modern period. So we are hoping that the many people will be able to get this and understand it correctly. And the last one, of course, to understand will help us to make sustainable environment, and sustainable environment will bring us to much more better, happier world. So thank you for your most divine attention and listening.
Mnogo hvala, Mohamed. Thank you very much.
Pleasure is all mine.
We all learned a lot about the plague epidemics in 18th century Bosnia and their repercussions on the local cultural history. We will move now to the Q&A section after your talk. And I would like, if you don't mind, to pose the first question. Perhaps you told us, but I couldn't hear. There was a problem with the sound, I think, for all of us. There were some interruptions in your voice. So perhaps you told us, but I must have missed it. What was the source for these legendary healers in white clothes?
It's a good question. Thank you very much, sir. So, what is the source? As far as we all know, the medieval Bosnia was not Christian. It was Christian, but not like, Catholic Christian or Orthodox Christian. They had heresy. So, the white clothes man, healer, starts a legend actually from these days. And who had wrote about it? The first one was the Inquisitor in the 1478. Tolerado, his name was it. He wrote about it, and in next centuries, in 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries, the Bosnian famous, we can see poetries, they were all using this myth, this symbol in their writings to explain the people, to explain the common folk how there was a Haydar Dede, someone who is healer from the God himself. And in the 18th century, when we know for the sure, the Ottoman Madrasa in Bosnia, we had 4 of them. They had, how can we say, just a department for Haydar Dede. And in Bosnian language, it's still written like that. We still have, like idioms, which are saying like that, to a nice white healer or whatsoever, or Haydar Dede. Come to the Christian, come to the Jew, come to the Muslim. And it is still continue, to this day.
Thank you. Is there another question? I see Elchin.
Just a minute, will go off. Computer, I shall plug it. Give me a minute.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm ready.
Okay, Elchin.
Thank you very much for this excellent presentation. First of all, your visual material was very, very intriguing. I also, I'm sorry to say there were slight disconnections in your voice. So I'm sorry if you have already told about it and if I missed it. But I'm really curious about among those reactions people paid to the plague. There were, as far as I understood, there were both elements to instigate sectarian conflicts, and there are also elements which which show some instances of cooperation about among those intercommunal in the intercommunal relations. Am I right? If so, can you please summarize which are prone to develop intercommunal cooperation and those which prone to instigate sectarian conflicts between two different groups among Muslims, Christians, and Jewish people? Thank you.
It's a good question. Thank you very much. I like it. So, in order to understand how was interreligious connection between the people in the Balkan region, first of all, we have to know that even that the Croatian, Bosnian Serbs or whoever became Muslims, Christians, Jews, they still had their hidden traditions, like the pagan traditions, and these hidden traditions, they cannot be explained like it's like in Islam like this or in Christians like this. And starting from the hidden traditions, we can make several points. The first point is like in Bosnian hidden tradition, I call it like that, we can find that no matter what, on the 31st October, on the 2nd June, then on the 14th December, on the 30 March, next one is the 20 April, the people used to gather together, for cleaning, washing up, speaking, explaining their problems. That's strictly hidden tradition. And after the first point, the second point was that the people, it's explained, no matter what religion is it, you shall go to his funeral, to his marriage, to be together in the good and in the bad times, in church or in the mosque. The third point is that the many communities, for example, in Sarajevo, I showed the Haji Mustafa Mosque. The keys of Haji Mustafa Mosque was given to the Greece man, starting from the 1720s, to protect it, to clean it. He asked for it normally. In Yaite, we all had seen the monasteries, so the keys of monastery was given to the Muslims to protect it without any problems. And the fourth, last point which we can say, it's the interaction like on the daily basis. So in many other Ottoman provinces, it was known, Christian village, Muslim village, Jewish village, and whatsoever. But with us in Bosnia and all other region, everyone was connected. There was no strictly, like a border. This village starting is from Muslim, and the next one is Christian. So in one village, the mixed households from Christian, Muslim, Jews all together, they were living. And the religion, respect our religions, was most common still in Bosnia, and everyone will get to know it, and want to understand better for a better world. So I believe we can make like 4 points, just like I said.
How about those which prone to instigate sectarian disputes? I mean, that took my attention because you mentioned about the manual for proper behavior during the play, right? And one of the items in that manual, you said people should take care of how take care about their behaviors. This is sinful. This is not proper. When what sin is defined, then I thought that might be, some problems might be arose regarding that. Is that happening?
Okay. Now it's okay. It's more understandable. No problem. So, of course, when every new rule, codex were given to the people, to the nation, to the Hulk, however we say it, doesn't matter. In the beginning, there were some major. It was written about some major problems. It was, like the people didn't want to use a white color in the beginning. It was so, like how they were saying, the white color represent a dead, a symbol for a death, not symbol for a good or something like that. But throughout a 6 year of Ali Pasha Hekimoğlu reign, to the 1741, 1742, he managed to combine the obvious medicine rules to put it, with a normal people life. So instead of white color, they use something similar to the white. And next, about waters. The waters, it's so important to us. Even in 1740s, the all water wells, supplements, were going directly to the houses, not to the, to the central marketplace, and they were taking it. And they put it, like a fence to protect it, and whatsoever. And in 1750s to 1760s, the main all regions and things, which were written about the rules, they were either in easy or harder way accepted.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Yes, Professor Varlık has a question.
Let me unmute myself, and Nüket is okay. Thank you for your presentation, and it's actually very interesting to hear about this outbreak as a case study. But how should I put it? As someone who spent at least the last 20 years reading texts about plague narratives, and I think there's something here that we need to be a little more careful about. So I would like to clarify a few issues, because some of these sources describing plague and describing, how it happens, where it comes from, sometimes associating outbreaks with moral behavior, sinful behavior, or other, social tensions, tend to repeat some tropes that are part of the genres. Right? There's a longer tradition coming from the medieval period. So in those sources, there are certain tropes such as poisoning the wells, or associating disease with certain groups of people, or, for example, the number of mortality being so high that there are not enough living people to bury the dead. So I think it is important to recognize some of these as tropes of the sources, not as a description of the actual reality, and maintaining that kind of analytical distance with the source. In certain cases, maybe it is, important to put them in context as kind of biases that coming from the sources, but not taking them at their face value, if you see what I'm saying. For example, the emphasis on poisoning the wells. Outbreaks of plague have nothing to do with water sources. Zero. Like, no connection. If we're talking about cholera, maybe. That's a 19th century phenomenon, and cholera spreads with contaminated water. Plague has no connection with water. So when they talk about poisoning the waters, poisoning the wells, that's basically repeating a 14th century I don't know if I want to call a myth, but a trope, let's say a trope, that associated outbreaks of plague with Jews in Western Europe, for example. It's kind of, it's kind of older stories being circulated, recycled, but, applied to different contexts. I mean, these sources are very creative in the way they use older material and apply them into new contexts. But I think, as like modern historians, I think we need to be very careful in, how we understand them. So, I just wanted to point it out. And also, you mentioned 4 months for the quarantine period. I haven't heard anywhere the period of 4 months. Is it possible it's 40 days? Just, I wasn't sure, because maybe that was a different practice in that case that I don't know about. And I also wanted to point out 2 studies that I'm sure you're familiar with. One is Karima Filan's study of the Basheski, she's, written her dissertation, like, I think more than 10 years ago, and I think now it came out as at least in Turkish, as a book. It's a very detailed reading of the source, and there's also discussion of the plague outbreak in it as well. And there's also another monograph on Dubrovnik and epidemics of plague in the city, expelling the plague. This called, it covers the time period between 1347 to 1534. It's an earlier period, but I think it's kind of, it's important to keep in mind the older historical context. So I just wanted to point out those.
So thank you very much for a nice answer. And I can say this, I spent 6.5 months in Dubrovnik, almost gathered 10,000 documents at least, in Latin, in Ottoman, and so on. The main correct is like when the pilgrims were coming from, from Jerusalem or from Mecca to Dubrovnik, to Bosnia, they were put in quarantine zone for 4 days, first 4 days. After first 4 days, if anyone had any problem, like coughing, sniffing, and so on, they will put him in another 4 months. But first 4 days was most important for Christians or Muslims. If he had something, to do or whatsoever, and they wrote this, I can say like a rule in their status, it's called like a status of the city of Dubrovnik in 1666, right after the big earthquake which happened. So after the 4 days, the man, the woman, or whatever, was dead or would have stayed for another 4 months. And who was giving them a food or medical supplements? On the paper, it was the obligatory of the Ottoman Empire. I mean, the authorities from the city of Trebinje and from the city of Utin. But in the reality, the Dubrovnik government had to give them a food. Because if they do not give it, no supply, they would go to the city directly. And they could not, stop them. It was, problematical from the Dubrovnik government. So they were supplying them. And this mainly happened to the 70s, 70s, when the Napoleon had invade the Dubrovnik Republic. And it used, sometimes to be a good politics, sometimes a bad. That's something, for another debate, for discussing. But it's still, the building was still restored 2 years ago. Now they have a restaurant, sometimes even a hotel. It's quite fantastic to eat somewhere where was used to be a quarantine for those days. And for your another point, actually you are correct. Everyone can know that there is no precise standardization for medieval New Age documents. When the one was explaining, is he explaining like a plague or he was just making a comparison? So yeah, thank you for that, brief information. I will take care more about it. We have example in Emlia Çelebiya. He writes his diaries, seyahatname. For the Erzurum, he is saying like that the cats, when the December came, they are frozen, and in the March they are unfroze and going normally. That's maybe some, like another example about your topic which you were saying.
Thank you. And Fatih has a question. Yes, Fatih.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. I have just a small question. You talked about after the Black period and massive marriages. You mentioned massive marriages, which is something can be expected. Do you have more detailed data about this? I mean, before Black, during Black, and after Black, in a comparative perspective? Do you have concrete data to this?
Yeah, no problem. So, right before the plague, Topal Osman Pasha, in early 1720s, when he came to be, a pasha, to be an officer in Sarajevo, during his, 7 years of reign, he wrote that the people were marrying like, in a year, they were doing from year to year, that they were. He wrote about, just a minute. He wrote about 20,000, all of it, Christians, Muslims, Jewish. When I say all of it, the people from Croatia provinces, from Serbia, they were coming to get married to Bosnia. Why it's the reason? Because we have many more rivers and whatsoever. That's, like understandable for that period. During the plague, we have Sirke Osman Pasha, Haji Ibrahim Pasha, Abdullah Pasha Muksinzade, and during their reigns, they wrote that not in a month, in a year, that the people, approximately 40 to 60 marriages had happening in Bosnia, and what else they write? That the, how can we say, that the cemetery in Sarajevo, in Moscow, was getting full in a one day. So the period after the plague, Ali Pasha Hekimoğlu, he wrote that on the day of his coronation, when he was appointed to be a Wazir of Bosnia, that was 25th June, 1736, that was a second coronation, that 3,000 people had been married in a one day by our government directly. So in this case, we can speak about forced marriages, which government impressed, and the normal marriages. So a forced marriages, they are pointing from 3 to 6,000. But the normal marriages, which were happening, they are putting it like approximately to 12,000 in 1 year. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Let me just add what you said about this quarantine hospital that turned into a hotel. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yes. So the same thing happened in Monemvasia, that's Ottoman Menekşe or Benefşe to the east coast of the Peloponnese. The Lazaretto there, the quarantine house, has been restored into a luxurious hotel nowadays. Any other questions from our participants or attendees?
Or comments?
We still have 3 more minutes. Perhaps if any new question comes up.
It seems we don't have other questions.